From Washington, this is VOA News. On the sidelines of the 70th anniversary of D-Day, potential steps to ease tensions in Ukraine. The U.S. begins a new effort to seek a political solution in Syria. I'm Vincent Bruce, reporting from Washington. The United States, Russia, and Ukraine took tentative steps Friday to ease tensions spawned by the Ukraine crisis in a series of meetings on the sidelines of D-Day commemoration ceremonies in northern France. U.S. President Barack Obama met with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in a push to bring what the Kremlin called a speedy end to violence and military operations in eastern Ukraine. U.S. officials said Mr. Obama used the brief and unplanned meeting to emphasize that Russia can only contribute to regional peace by recognizing newly elected Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko. The U.S. president urged the Russian leader to end support for pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine. Mr. Putin also met Friday with Ukraine's President-elect Poroshenko, who takes the oath of office Saturday in Kiev. French officials later told reporters that Mr. Putin and Mr. Poroshenko have agreed to open more formal talks aimed at negotiating a ceasefire in eastern Ukraine. As VIPs gathered for ceremonies in Normandy Friday, marking the 70th anniversary of D-Day, thousands of visitors from across the world also traveled to the region. Henry Ridgewell reports from Normandy on the celebrations happening alongside the remembrance services.
Today, Carentan is a peaceful corner of France. 70 years ago, it saw some of the most ferocious fighting of the Battle for Normandy. This week, Carentan has held some of the most colourful anniversary events. The 70th anniversary has attracted a modern-day invasion of period military hardware, along with thousands of visitors in wartime dress. Local residents have given them a warm welcome. The bonds of friendship between nations, sealed 70 years ago in battle, still appear strong. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, Carentan, Normandy, France.
More on these stories at voanews.com. Jordan's ambassador to the United Nations is set to replace Nafi Pillay as the next UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon informed the General Assembly Friday of his intent to nominate Prince Zayed Al Hussein. Vietnam has called on the United States to take a larger role in protecting the peace and settling conflicts in the disputed waters of the South China Sea. Vietnamese Foreign Ministry spokesman Lee Hai-binh in Hanoi called for more U.S. involvement as Vietnamese ships continue to clash with Chinese ships near a controversial oil rig that Beijing placed in disputed waters last month. Hassan Nasrallah, head of the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah, says this week's re-election of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad proves that any political solution to the country's bloody conflict begins and ends with Mr. Assad. In Washington Friday, State Department spokeswoman Marie Harf urged parties that have influence over the Syrian regime, including Hezbollah, Iran, and Russia, to push Syria's government toward a diplomatic solution.
We've called on parties who have influence over the regime, Iran, Hezbollah, Russia, to use their influence with the Assad regime to push them towards a diplomatic solution and push them to a better place. It's in no way a change of policy, but it's a recognition of the reality that there are outside actors who have influence on the regime and should be using it.
Syrian officials said more than 10 million people voted for Mr. Assad, giving him almost 89% of the vote. The polling was held only in government-controlled areas on Tuesday. The U.S. unemployment rate held steady at 6.3% last month, and the economy had a net gain of 217,000 jobs. That's according to Friday's report from the Labor Department. The Central Intelligence Agency says it will launch accounts on both Facebook and Twitter. It's in its first tweet, quote, "We can neither confirm nor deny that this is our first tweet," unquote. It had been retweeted over 75,000 times in just a few hours. U.S. National Archives has released 2,000 pages of documents from former President Bill Clinton's time at the White House, including notes, memos, and speeches that had been withheld from public view. The collection covers a large range of topics, including Mr. Clinton's final year in office, Supreme Court nominations, and discussions about foreign policy. The documents feature White House concerns about Rwanda and whether to label the mass killings there in a 1994 a genocide, among other issues. More at voanews.com. I'm Vincent Bruce in Washington.
That's the latest world news from VOA.